All right, welcome Science 10A class to class on Wednesday, March 25th. Today we are starting our conversation about DNA. So to start, here is a diagram showing the difference between a DNA and RNA strand. And so you've seen and talked about DNA in previous classes and talked about meiosis and mitosis, so the splitting up of cells and the duplication of cells. And part of that process is duplicating DNA, making sure that every cell in the human body or any organism's body has a copy of that DNA, so then it can then use that DNA in order to create things like proteins. And so further down the line, we're going to be talking about how DNA will be creating proteins, also how it actually splits up and replicates. But to start today, we're just going to talk about the structure of DNA. So to start here, so here's the DNA on the right, and then you have RNA on the left. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. RNA stands for ribonucleic acid. A couple key differences is that DNA has this double strand where there are two strands that twist around each other, and then you have RNA with just one single strand. Okay. Both of them can carry the same information, but they have different functions. So one other key thing, one difference between the DNA and RNA is that is these bases that they include. So DNA includes cytosine, guanine, adenine, and thymine, whereas RNA has the first three that are the same, but it has uracil instead of thymine. Okay. So from that, you can also see that there's always these base pairs. So the C represents cytosine, the G represents guanine, and they are always paired together. Anywhere where there's cytosine and guanine on this strand, they are paired together. You might have cytosine on the left or on the right. The other side, the strand that it is attached to, will have the opposite on the other side. And then you have the same phenomenon with thymine and adenine, and that they are paired. Okay, so to look at this in terms of a slightly more complex structure, you can actually see that thymine, adenine, cytosine, and guanine are actually more complicated than they are shown up here. So this is kind of a more simplified version where each nitrogenous base, we call these, are just kind of simplified into these bars here. Okay, well, so this is cytosine on this diagram, and then down here, cytosine is actually this, right there. And so it is actually a little bit more complicated, and the way that these connect to each other is through mostly covalent bonds. So if I zoom in on cytosine here, now one thing that this doesn't totally show is that actually at each of these vertices, so wherever these lines are meeting, you can actually find carbon. Carbon is the main basis for like how where all these organic molecules are created, and DNA is just a complex organic molecule. There's carbons at each of those vertices. You can also see that in some cases there's nitrogen, in some cases there's oxygen and hydrogen as well. Okay, so this are a little bit more complex. The other thing to note is that here we have something called a phosphate group, and then here we have a sugar. And so going down the strand of on the right side here, and also the strand on the left, is this alternating pattern of sugar to phosphate to sugar to phosphate, and so on. Same as going up, sugar to phosphate, phosphate to sugar, and so on. Okay, and so this is the main structure of DNA. And one last thing to note before I'll let you go and try the assignment on Google Classroom is that the way that the strand on the left and the right are attached is through these weak hydrogen bonds. Okay, the key thing is that they're weak, allowing the strands to be separated, which later on down the line, when we talk about how the information in DNA is read, you kind of need to split those two strands apart. Also, when you are creating new DNA, you need to split those strands apart in order to copy it. And so it has this all the way down the DNA strand. You have these weak hydrogen bonds. Well, you can kind of pull the two strands apart down the middle, and these solid lines, so these hydrogen bonds are shown with the dotted lines. All of these other like solid bonds, these solid lines, those are all covalent bonds, so they're strong. So when you're pulling the two sides of the DNA strand, these solid bonds are going to stay firm and keep their shape, whereas the hydrogen bonds can be separated. Okay, and that will be a little bit more important down the line when we are talking about how DNA makes proteins, and then also how DNA gets replicated. Okay, so the next thing to do is go on to Google Classroom. There are 2 links to follow there, one to Khan Academy and then another to a little simulation that you can have a look at, and it gives you a little bit more information about the structure of DNA. Then you complete the Google drawing, and so the Google drawing is just a canvas that you can create the structure of DNA. So build the structure of DNA. So you insert shapes in there and from the Google drawing, the toolbar at the top, or you can get a little bit more creative by drawing on there. And then there's also a Google form to complete. So that assignment, so complete those 2 things. So follow the links, then complete the Google drawing and the Google form. Then when that is done, you would submit the assignment. So that assignment is due at the beginning of class on Friday. So when I say the beginning of class, I mean the beginning of the school day, so 9:30 in the morning. Okay. All right. Good luck. I will be available through email or Zoom throughout the class if you have any questions. And then we have our Zoom meeting call later on in the class. So have a look at Moodle for that link. And yeah, talk to everybody soon.